Today, Bitcoin hangs on to the $104,000 level to kick off the new month. Andrew McCormick of eToro US sits down with us at Bitcoin 2025 to discuss the retail trading app's outlook in America after the company's NASDAQ debut. And SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce discusses the agency dropping its case against Binance. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Mackenzie Sigalos. Now, crypto prices are mixed to kick off the month of June. As of noon Eastern, Bitcoin was little changed, trading at the $104,000 level. Ether, however, climbed under 1%, trading above $2,500, and XRP rose 0.5%. Now, last month, institutions and corporations together helped to drive up the price of Bitcoin, with the cryptocurrency ending the month about 10% higher. That was Bitcoin's second straight monthly rise, driven by strong inflows into Bitcoin ETFs and continued purchases of Bitcoin by corporate treasury departments. Investors expect the trend to continue this month and to benefit Bitcoin's long-term performance, even as tariff uncertainty continues. Speaking at Bitcoin 2025 last week, Swan Bitcoin CIO Ben Workman discussed some of the catalysts that helped Bitcoin reach a new record under $112,000 last month.
I think Bitcoin became really de-risked in the market recently. So prior to this year, you really still had a lot of regulatory headwinds ahead of you. People weren't sure how the administration was going to embrace Bitcoin. And when we came out with a very pro-administration and then we started getting movement in the SEC, you started seeing Bitcoin getting de-risked as a commodity in the market. And when that happened, it opened up the doors for corporations to really embrace this as an asset class that they could build into their own balance sheets. And because of that, we're seeing a lot of adoption. You're seeing a lot of new capital flow in. You've seen a lot of the announcements at this event. So it's been really great.
Okay, let's continue with some more of those conversations from Bitcoin 2025. At the conference, Crypto World's Talia Kaplan sat down with Andrew McCormick, head of eToro US, to discuss the company's IPO, plans for the Israel-based firm's future in America, and what's changed for the retail trading app in the US recently.
Until now, investors with eToro US could invest in three cryptocurrencies: Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, and Ethereum.
That's right.
But now you just announced here at Bitcoin 2025 that US investors can invest in an additional 12 cryptocurrencies, including XRP, Cardano's ADA token, and Dogecoin, just to name a few. What prompted that decision to come about?
So we were passionate about crypto. We're an OG in the space. We've been around a long time, since 2013. So we are committed to offering crypto assets to investors all around the world. Obviously, in the past couple of years, the regulatory environment in the U.S. has been tough, right? A lot of litigation, a lot of lawsuits, a lot of press releases and negativity. And we see some of those dark clouds has lifted. We have an SEC that we think is more reasonable and approachable and more supportive of innovation, right? So in light of new guidance, the new crypto task force, litigation being dropped, I think the time is right. Let's start adding crypto assets again, go from 3 to 15, and hopefully in the future, even more.
Now, 2 weeks ago, eToro shares popped in its NASDAQ debut after the company raised nearly $310 million in its initial public offering. How was that received internally, and what does that signal to you?
It was an amazing moment. So people at eToro have worked really, really, really hard, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get to that point. And as a company that's so passionate about breaking down the barriers to investing for users all around the world, I think it was especially important and valuable to become a company where our own users could become owners. And just giving it another opportunity for people to invest in eToro, not just venture capitalists, not just banks, for retail investors. Very special. A lot of parties, a lot of celebration, and it was exciting just to get it done. And now it's time to do the real work. Becoming a publicly traded company is such a joy, such an honor, and something you just take so seriously. But that's day one. Similar to, you get married and the wedding, it's exciting, it's awesome, but the real work and the real journey and the real joy is in the marriage itself. And that's the path we're on now. And so we're 2 weeks of being a publicly traded company, and hopefully for decades and hundreds of years more.
Now, eToro is actually based in Israel, and in its IPO filing, the company laid out 1,500 words laying out some potential business risks associated with operating in Israel, citing the Israel-Hamas conflict. So you're the head of eToro US. I'm wondering, do those potential business risks potentially create the need to move more of the operations to the U.S.? Do you anticipate that might happen? Or do you think that the headquarters will in fact stay in Israel?
Yeah, so the DNA is in Israel, been around 18 years. It's so much talent, history, and ability there. And the team there is amazing and always supportive of everything that we're doing. Not just the U.S., but our colleagues in Australia, Europe, UK. Here in the U.S., we have our regulated entities. We have a great team, really smart, dedicated people. And so there are a lot of tough situations in Israel in the past 2 years, but we haven't missed a beat in terms of what we can offer to our customers because people are diligent and dedicated, and we have a strong team here, and we're supported by an amazing team overseas. And it's very humbling at times. Well, they'll take conference calls from bomb shelters, right? And a lot of them have gone and served their country as part of the military, but yeah, they're still dedicated to the mission of eToro, the eToro team, and that's just, we're driven to make investing easier for people all around the world. And so hopefully there'll be more and more resources dedicated to U.S. We have a great team in Israel with a great history. We've seen the ups and downs and have full faith and belief in them for sure.
So eToro was initially supposed to go public via SPAC back in 2021, but those plans were put on hold because equities tanked the next year. But your CEO, Yoni Assia, was actually on CNBC when eToro debuted on the NASDAQ. And he said that the company was able to go public now because the company was able to significantly scale profitability. So what is being done from the U.S. perspective in order to ensure that continues to happen?
Yeah, had a great year last year, as Yoni probably said, in 2024, to become not just a publicly traded company, but a successful publicly traded company that inspires hope and confidence. And we have done so well in Europe and the UK. We're one of the top trading firms in almost every country in Europe, and it's going to happen in the United States. Today is a big moment, adding new crypto assets. And I think we're going to have a lot more of those moments, new products, new resources. Maybe it's M&A, looking at different product lines we can acquire. But we are dedicated all around the world to make investing easier and more accessible. And I hope fun too. Investing is so important, and I just want to make it fun. And I think eToro does a good job of making it accessible and engaging. So hopefully in the coming months, we'll have more opportunities to chat about different product launches. What eToro is very unique of our social element, right? So you can go on a lot of platforms and buy stocks or crypto or maybe both, but eToro is one of the few places where you can go on the platform, make investments, but also share ideas. Look to people around the world of like, what do you think about capital markets? What do you like? What don't you like? And it's really powerful because whatever we do in life, parenting tips, recipes, vacation ideas, you go to social media, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So why not investing? And that's what eToro is all about, just trying to invest together and become better investors as a community.
So let's take a look at some of the numbers. And I want to focus on crypto, especially because we're here at a crypto conference. But revenue from crypto assets more than tripled to upward of 12 million in 2024. And 1/4 of eToro's net trading contribution stemmed from crypto last year. That's up from 10% in 2023. So what do you attribute that bump to? Is it because we saw that boost for crypto after the presidential election when President Trump, who was at the time a pro-crypto candidate, won that election?
Yeah, I think there's two stories in 2024. Overall, it was a big year for Bitcoin and crypto in general. I think the first half of the year, you had the Bitcoin ETFs come out. Right. The fact that you have Wall Street starting to opening the doors more to crypto assets, I think is a huge opportunity for the space and drove price. And what I love about that asset class is there's a lot of people who might not be ready to get their own wallets and do all the deep crypto stuff and go down that rabbit hole, but they're familiar with ETFs and brokerage accounts. And those Bitcoin ETFs is a great way to get into the space. In the second half of the year, driven around the election, right? I think that had a huge boost to crypto in general, but our capital markets overall. And I think a lot of that was the regulation. The last couple of years have been really tough when you feel like the government is coming attacking you as a firm and as an industry. And when you're trying to build and innovate and do cool stuff to help people, that's tough. And so some lifting of those shadows, I think, gave people a lot of hope and drove a lot of activity. And I think there'll be more of that this year and a very, very exciting future ahead.
And for our main story, I sat down with SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce at the conference where she said that President Trump's meme coin and others are outside the purview of the agency, and therefore investors shouldn't expect any guidance on them.
Now, the last time we spoke was in Denver over a year ago, and it was a completely different world with respect to where the commission stood on crypto policy. Talk to me about this evolution from Donald Trump on the campaign trail to taking office to having Paul Atkins at the helm and you running all these industry roundtables.
Yeah, it's been really a nice change because for many years now I've been complaining about the fact that the commission has not taken proactive steps to provide clarity. And now finally we're at a place where we can do that. And so to see that actually happening and really to get a chance to work with people inside and outside the commission who share the goal of getting to clarity has been very rewarding.
So in the last few months, you've been hosting these industry roundtables, inviting in crypto executives, and you've also been having these meetings behind closed doors with different leaders from across the spectrum. What have you learned? Has there been anything surprising beyond the kinds of conversations you've been having the last few years with members of the industry?
No, I mean, I think it's what I expected, that people are asking for clarity, and then when you press them, I think they don't all agree, which is what you would expect. There are going to be differences of opinion on how to get to the right place, and I think that's where the difficulty is going to come for us. We've got to sort through those views. We have to try to set crypto in the precedent that we have, the legal precedent that we have, and as with any other securities issue, you're going to have lawyers who disagree on these things.
Now, in January, we had the SEC rescind SAB 121, this niche accounting bulletin that stood in the way of banks being able to custody cryptocurrencies, and you really championed that change. Why do you feel that this was such a detrimental rule to have in place?
Yeah, well, first of all, it wasn't even a rule, and I think that was one problem, that it didn't go through the normal process. It was just a pronouncement. And what that pronouncement did is it said that lots of traditional entities that would have done custody for crypto, practically speaking, could not participate in providing custody for crypto. And so what we're trying to do with eliminating SAB 121 is to say, if you have experience in custody, you can come into this space. It's not to say that entities that are crypto native and want to provide custody that they can't do it, but it's really to say we want to have as broad a pool as possible of potential custodians. That's what's best for the safety of people's assets.
You know, since January, the SEC has probably been the most aggressive in terms of rolling back certain guidance that stood in the way of digital asset companies being able to do business in the U.S. What else can we expect to see out of the commission?
I think we'll continue working. We're trying to provide guidance as we can, and then we're working toward rulemaking where we can provide clarity. And then I think it's also watching how we work with other agencies that you mentioned, and also working with Congress as they try to provide clarity. So I'm hoping that we'll see lasting rules that people can rely on and build businesses on and make decisions based on.
It really has been this unprecedented moment where the SEC, in concert with the OCC, the FDIC, the Fed, have all been revising guidance, making it easier for crypto companies to operate here in the U.S. I was having a conversation with Robinhood CEO Vlad Tenev, and he said that he's been having really productive conversations with you and other members of the SEC, and that it might be possible to bring to fruition some of his tokenization ambitions without having lawmakers necessarily pass some of these crypto bills into law. What are your thoughts on tokenizing public equities and even opening up the private equity markets?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an area where we've seen a lot of interest in the last 4 months. People saying we want to try to experiment with some of this stuff here in the U.S. And people really think that the technology could be useful as an underlying technology to bring some efficiencies into the traditional financial markets. I'm a regulator, not an entrepreneur, so we'll see how these things play out. But I think what we need to do at the SEC is take the existing rule book that we have, look at places where there might be barriers to people trying some of these things. And Congress has already given us the authority to make adjustments where we need to, and so we can do that with the authority we have already.
Now, another rule change that we saw from the SEC was in February. It was related to meme tokens, saying that they're not securities. It coincided with the president and his wife launching their own meme tokens, and there's been questions about whether or not those two things came in tandem. What do you say to critics who are concerned about either that decision or the timing?
So there was a lot of interest in meme coins of all kinds. And one of the things that I had complained about over the last several years is that when we saw emerging trends, we didn't speak to how the regulation affected those emerging trends, whether that was NFTs or whether that was crypto lending. And we really could have spoken. I mean, there are many other examples, right, where we could have spoken and we didn't. And so here was something where I saw a lot of interest in this out in the world in meme coins. And it made sense for us to say, people, if you are expecting that there's SEC protection around these, you should not expect that. Now, of course, it's always facts and circumstances. You can package almost anything as into a securities transaction, but generally it's good for people to know I should not be looking to the SEC for protection in this area.
You know, one question that's also come up related to the president and other crypto tokens that he's aligned with is whether or not there's unlawful actions there. That's an open question right now that some Democratic lawmakers are pursuing. Whose job is that to pursue that? Is that something where the SEC would look at whether there's potential wrongdoing in some of these token launches?
I mean, what we're trying to do is we're trying to come up with a comprehensive set of rules that is applied not arbitrarily, but that's applied to people. Everyone in the same circumstance gets treated the same way. But before you start enforcing rules, you have to have the rules in place. And so that's really where we're trying to go. And I think we all have seen that we desperately need to have clarity. That doesn't mean that the government has to write a rule to cover every instance. It means that we as people have to come together and make a decision about how we want things to be regulated, and then we apply those rules to everyone the same.
Now, just today, the SEC dismissed its case against Binance with prejudice, meaning that you can't bring those same claims against them. It really, to me, signals the last major case that was in question with respect to a lot of the SEC enforcement actions that were brought against big crypto actors in the last 4 years. Talk to me about that decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're trying to do with the enforcement cases is look at them on a facts and circumstances basis. And it really goes back to what I just said. We didn't have a clear set of rules. There were a lot of questions about how this particular activities in the crypto space intersected with our existing securities laws. And so we're trying to take a step back, use our regulatory tools to write those rules, and then enforce those rules. Now, I think it's really important to underscore that it is not time for people to think I have a free pass to go rip people off in the name of crypto. That is not the case. We don't have authority over everything at the SEC, but there are other agencies of the federal and state government that have authority over that activity that is in this space. And I can speak for the SEC, well, I speak for myself, but obviously I know my colleagues too care very strongly about using our tools to go after fraudsters who try to rip people off in our space. And that is not something that's going to stop.
Okay, that's all for Crypto World today, but we'll be back again tomorrow as we wrap our coverage of Bitcoin 2025. We'll have more conversations for you from the largest Bitcoin conference in the US, including with Kraken CEO Dave Ripley. We look forward to seeing you then.